It's our world too. It's our world too.
Hi, I'm Robert Perala, and I'm with the Perala Report, and we're here at Contact in the Desert, which is looking at extraterrestrial science, the mystery schools, and exposing extraordinary stories of people who have had contact with extraterrestrials. I was very, very thrilled to catch up with Travis Walton, who was one of the leading speakers here and a panelist today, and tells us a very compelling story of what it is when a human actually has contact with extraterrestrial entity. Thank you so much, Travis, for being on our show. I really appreciate you being here. We're all very, very honored to have you. Could we just go right to the actual experience itself, the date, and when the truck pulled up at that special site, and then what exactly happened?
November 5th, 1975. We were leaving work, and we hadn't been driving very far, still very alert from our labor, and we saw the glimmers of light coming through the trees. It was not all that alarming at first, but when we got up to where we could clearly see it, it was unmistakable, a glowing disc hovering there in the sky. I got out of the truck immediately. I yelled. Actually, one of the guys in the back yelled, "It's a flying saucer." And I told Mike, "Stop the truck," because he didn't really see what everybody was talking about. But at first, because it was up the hill, over above the top of the ridge, and the road we were on was paralleling the crest of the ridge as we drove south up towards the rim road. And so I threw open the door, and I got out, and I started towards it. And, this was pretty alarming to the rest of the crew, but from my perspective, it was an impulse that, I just wanted to see it up close, not real close. I was actually assuming that it would take off before I got to dangerously close. But that wasn't happening, and I slowed down the closer I got to it, and the anxiety and the alarm of the calls from the men grew the closer I got to it. But it was just so amazing to be looking up. It was about at a 45-degree angle from me, and it was making the strangest sound. It's like nothing I've ever heard. And I could hear it much better than they could in the truck. I could hear the whole range of this really low throbbing kind of a sound, and this other frequencies that were mixed in. That there was this high frequency element to it that was, it was really off the range of human hearing on both ends. And it was a kind of a sound that you both heard and felt at the same time. And the guys in the truck were, saying the same kind of thing, that they could feel this strange vibration. And they also, more than one of them said it seemed like something was about to happen. And I think what they were actually talking about was a kind of an electrical charge that builds up, that was building up coming from this craft. And it's probably similar to what a lot of people who are struck by lightning feel, that there's this kind of a feeling of a prickly sort of it's a sensation that comes right before the blast. And I think that's what they were thinking. But when I was sitting there looking up at it like that, and it was starting to get, really intense. And, I was curious, but, my heart was pounding. I was really terrified. At the same time, I didn't want to show it, So when it suddenly got louder and started to move up into the sky, not real quickly. It was unsteady and a little bit jerky or something. It was a kind of a rocking sort of emotion, but it didn't like spin. It was like a spinning top, when a top spins and it starts to become unsteady, and it's right before. and then it'll just fall over at the end. So that was the kind of emotion it was, but it wasn't spinning around, and a lot of people misinterpret this. It wasn't, the same side was towards us, it was just like a spinning top in the way it was kind of bobbling as it moved up. But just the increase in the volume was so startling that I just jumped for cover sort of instinctively. There was a big pile of logging debris that had been put in the middle of the clearing. That's where they put them so that when the wet weather comes, they can burn it up and eliminate this part of the fire danger. But there was a big log sticking up there, and I got down behind that in a crouch. So I went immediately into a crouch. And they were really screaming at me, get out of here, because what they wanted to do was just take off, and they felt like I needed to get in the truck so they could do that. I think that's basically why they were so, kept swearing at me to get back in the truck. But I really didn't need to be told at that point. I was scared enough to know that it seemed dangerous, really dangerous, like something was about to happen. So when I stood up to run back to the truck, bam! That's when it hit me. And it was just a stunning kind of force that it's kind of hard to describe, but you can compare it to being, when somebody runs into you real hard, like if you're playing football and you didn't see the guy coming at all, and you get a hard tackle out of
sudden impact,
your blind spot, yeah. But it also had elements that were aspects of it that were kind of like an electrical shock. And one of the crew, it was described as, making a sound when it hit me. I didn't hear that, but I just blacked out. But Dwayne Smith later became a journeyman industrial electrician. And he said it sounded to him, and he said this more recently, just, like last year. He said that it sounded to him like high voltage. And I'm not sure what that means, whether it's like that sort of a surge. He says when these big knife switches close and you hear that power, it's not just the arcing of the contactors, it's the surge that the sound, that the energy makes. Whatever it was far more violent than was portrayed in the movie. In the movie, it's played down a lot.
Right.
But it was a stunning sort of a force. I was unconscious. And then I'm coming to, not very quickly. I was in and out for a long period of time. And just a lot of pain was my first perception. And the feeling of suffocation. I just couldn't seem to get enough air. I knew something was wrong with me, that I was injured. And but I didn't know where I was. I thought, and then I remembered approaching that object, and I thought maybe just running away I'd fallen and gotten hurt or something. But I just assumed that the crew would take me to the hospital. It seemed so hospital-like, At first, this was alarming to open your eyes and everything's all blurry, and then to have this sort of double vision where you got these two images that are kind of rotating around each other, and it was kind of increased the vertigo, the feeling of dizziness to have this shifting vision. But there was a light above me, and even though it wasn't all that bright, it was painful to look at. It was actually pretty dimly lit in there, but the light right above me and the closeness of the ceiling made me feel like I was on some kind of raised gurney or operating table. And so I thought maybe the crew had just taken me to the hospital.
Right.
And I could hear the sounds of movement around me, and I was thinking that this was just doctors, somebody there to alleviate this pain, and so I didn't. Moving made the pain worse, and I didn't want to aggravate the situation or create any kind of a greater problem by moving too much. So I held still, but I noticed they had this thing over my chest. I still had my shirt and jacket on, and that it just occurred to me that that kind of speaks to the recentness of how soon after I was hit that this was happening. But my shirt was pushed up and this thing was laying across me. And I was trying to hold still, and it was real blurry and I couldn't really focus. And, I could see the sort of a vague outline of a head with, white with a darker in between. And I thought this was just like surgical cap or mask.
Yeah.
And then my vision got sharper and I could see the face of this creature so close to mine. And it just was a shot of adrenaline. The shock right there was just, I was already feeling a rising panic because of the inability to breathe and the pain. And then, of course, it was all humid and hot and uncomfortable. It was claustrophobic. And then to see this face so close, I just recoiled from it. And I just sort of instinctively threw my arm up to push him away, to hit him away. But it was so hard to move. I was weak. And I don't know whether that was because I wasn't able to get enough air or because the gravity was heavier, but I felt so weak. And I hit him, and it fell back a lot easier than I thought it would be. It was softer than I thought it would be. But at the same time, I was rolling away from it, and this thing they had on me fell off on the floor. But I was just mainly just trying to keep from falling down, because they were coming around the table, and they were coming towards me. And they sort of extended their hands. At the time, I interpreted that as a very sort of a threatening sort of thing, like they were reaching towards me. But, that could have been a sort of a gesture of calm down or whatever. But to me, it seemed like they were coming at me. And I backed away. And the feeling that I was having so much trouble moving added to the panic, because you feel like you're not going to be able to defend yourself if you can't, control your body. But when I bumped up against the table or the shelf there behind me, I just turned real quick to see what I ran into, but I was mainly riveted on my attention of them coming towards me. So I just looked real quick, and there was a lot of stuff spread out there, but I just grabbed the biggest thing I could find and started flailing through the air so that they wouldn't come any closer. And they stopped, and I was just screaming threats and threatening them with this thing. And they stopped, and they were staring, but it was mainly the eyes. The eyes were just like boring into me. It was extremely uncomfortable, excruciating. It had this invasive, squirmy kind of a feeling inside my head that was agonizing. I figured out later what that was, but at the time it seemed like something that was really being inflicted on me. It turns out that wasn't the case, but I was thinking, how am I going to fight my way past them? That extra fear gave me enough strength to where I could kind of move my body. I didn't ever feel fully, functional, but they abruptly turned and left the room. And they went down this little passageway, turning right. And so, I was just afraid they would come back with reinforcements or something. So I threw that thing down. I should have, if I'd have been thinking, I'd have kept it, But I threw it down, and I went to the door and just looked to make sure there was nobody to the left and took off that way. But it was really this kind of torn between running and not running, because I couldn't see far enough behind me to see if they were chasing me, or far enough ahead to see if I was running into something worse, because the passageway curved so tightly. It was so cramped. This added to the claustrophobic feeling and this feeling of suffocation. I just couldn't get enough air. I don't know whether that was because the atmosphere wasn't correct for humans or because of my injury or both, but that was why I wasn't thinking very clearly. And I had this idea that if I could open a door, I could just drop to the ground and I'd be back in the woods and the truck would be right there and I could just jump in the truck and we could, run to safety. But I came to a room, I ran right past one. It was probably, could have been anyway, a better chance of getting out. But I was kind of in a little panic sprint there. But I went past that, and then I came to another door, and I looked in. It was just a round room. It was empty with a chair in the middle. But the chair was facing away from me, so I couldn't tell if there was somebody sitting in it. So I sidled along the side to make sure no one was sitting there. But I discovered if I moved deeper into the room, it would darken, or appear to darken, and points of light were left behind. I don't know whether this was some method of viewing where this thing was at, or if it was just some kind of like a map or a planetarium-like thing, a projection on the wall or through the walls or something. Some people suggested that it could be some kind of fiber optic type of light transmission, but I don't know whether it was a projection or what. But that was kind of, at first I thought, somebody was doing this, and then I quickly figured out that it had to do with my position in the room. But my main idea was open these doors. There was what looked like doors there, but there was no doorknob, no button to push. And so I looked at the chair, and the only buttons around were on the chair. They looked like buttons anyway. So I pushed some buttons and trying to see if I could get a door to open, and nothing would open the door. Touchscreen hadn't been invented. I didn't even think to touch the screen. But there was these lines on it, like black lines. It was like sort of real softly lit from behind, kind of like a Kindle or something like that. Only it was green, and the little black lines with little segments on them. There were no numbers or letters or anything like that I could see, but some of the buttons would actually make those things move. Some people suggest that there could have been some sort of symbols or something that would be, visible in another light frequency, but, I didn't see anything writing that I would recognize as writing. But I was just desperate to open a door somehow. The most unsettling thing that I did there was to move that lever. And it caused those points of light, star pattern, whatever it was, to move all in unison. It didn't move relative to each other, it just all rotated. And that was, kind of a dizzying sort of effect, because these were my main visual references for what was around me. And I, kind of instinctively knew. As irrational as I was because of my fear, I figured that was probably unwise. But I was thinking of pushing some more buttons, and then something caught my attention from the door I'd come through. Whether it was a sound or change in the light, whatever. But I turned and I saw this man standing there. And it looked to be like a human being to me. And that was very reassuring because, when I sensed that there was something there, there was a leap of fear that the aliens were back, So when I looked and saw this human, it was kind of a big flood of relief. And I went closer and I started trying to tell him about these creatures that were in here and trying to get him to, answer some questions. Where am I? What is this? I was really babbling, but he didn't respond. I kind of calmed down a little bit because, I was in the presence of someone who didn't seem to be as fearful as I was. And, I was assuming this was a rescue. Plus, I thought with this helmet on, maybe he couldn't hear me. Maybe he couldn't speak with it or be heard clearly with it on. So when he wanted me to come with him, I went. And we went through this thing. I think it was kind of like an airlock because it was part of like a little short hallway with both doors closed. But and then when the other one door opened, it seemed so much cooler and fresher, and there was quite a bit of relief from that. But the light was so bright out there in comparison to where I woke up that it was, it took me a few seconds to adjust my eyes to the brighter light. But he was trying to get me to go down this ramp, and it looked like it was way too steep to walk on. I thought I might fall. Partly because I felt off balance. I had this dizziness that wasn't going away. But when I went down, it, had a real sure sort of a feeling that it didn't have the slightest tendency to slip. And he's pulling me along like he's in a big hurry, and I'm sort of half stumbling because, I'm still weak and unsteady on my feet. I was trying to look around, and I saw that there were other craft in here, like the one I came out of. And apparently the thing that we were in wouldn't have been in the woods for sure. It was inside of some big enclosure, which kind of looked like an airplane hangar, but I thought could be part of a larger craft of some kind. The curved surface was, the wall behind me that curved up into the ceiling, and that was just a series of window-like or light fixtures that were giving off something that was quite a bit like sunlight. So this might have been a building where there were translucent panels on it and sunlight was shining through it, or maybe some kind of an artificial light that was supposed to be full spectrum or something. But I couldn't see through the window or see anything about what was outside. And he was hurrying me along. The other craft, 2, maybe 3, but I had to pay attention to keep from falling. And I was very concerned about where I was being taken. He wasn't answering me. I was a little bit disturbed by that. But when he took me out of this big hangar-like area down a hallway into another room, there were some other people who were dressed like him. And they weren't wearing helmets. So I thought, well, if that's the reason, that I'm not getting any answers, then, I should just start. I was really out of control with fear, really kind of crazy with fear the whole time.
Of course.
And so, I just started screaming and yelling all these questions at them. But they weren't getting excited about it. They didn't seem alarmed or, there was a kind of a vague expression of tolerance, like here's a baby throwing a tantrum or something. But to me, it was deadly serious. And when they started to lead me over to the table and they wanted me to lay down on that, and they're not answering me, they're not even speaking or trying to say anything to me, I started to fight back because, then I seriously doubted that this was any kind of a rescue. But there was 3 of them, and they were so much stronger than me. They probably would have been able to get me down even if I wasn't weakened like that. But in spite of my weakness, when the woman put a mask over my face, I was able to jerk my hand free, and I got just my finger under it, and I was trying to pull it away. Boom! I just went out. It wasn't painful, and I couldn't detect any kind of a recognizable odor. But I was unconscious. I know they could hear me because when they were trying to force me down, whenever I'd get really loud with the screaming, I saw kind of a wince, at the volume. But they just didn't seem to be the slightest bit interested in replying. Now, for a while, I thought maybe they were trying to disguise some kind of an accent. If they were really from Earth or something, that they could be from some particular country or something. But, it may have been just that they felt because of my utter hysteria that it'd be futile to try to talk with me or reason with me, that they just needed to put me out to put an end to the problem there. So I don't know where this conscious period occurred in the 5 days. It could have been, it was likely near the beginning, but it could have been anywhere.
And they returned you
And then, I woke up
on the highway.
On the highway, and made my way back into town and called for help.
That is astonishing. That is absolutely riveting. I think it's a perfect testimony of what really can happen. I'd like to be able to end our talk and our conversation here on a positive note just by saying thank you very much for a very compelling, very truthful, very honest testimony of what it is for a human being to be taken aboard an actual extraterrestrial aircraft and met up with extraterrestrial entities. This is the end of part 1. I hope we see you again and we can shoot part 2, find out how your recovery is doing, and just to check in on you and to let you know that the community that studies extraterrestrial science, and certainly the people here at Contact in the Desert, thank you very, very much for a very compelling testimony. We really, really thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's our world